When did life become a dramatic reality show in an in-law's basement? Oh my god. I literally just watched my 76-year-old in-law, Chloe, collapse while reading a will, and now I'm hiding in the laundry room trying to figure out if this is actually a reality show or if my life is just that dramatic. I'm shaking so hard, I almost dropped my cracked iPhone 14 battery health at 78% BTW. I don't even know where to start with this dumpster fire, but I need to vent, and this sub always gets it. GL, this whole week has been a financial nightmare leading up to this exact moment, so maybe I was primed for chaos. You guys know I'm Ella Lopez, 18F, and I'm seriously drowning in credit card debt. When I say drowning, I mean I got 2 separate overdraft fees this morning because a $43.67 Trader Joe's grocery bill hit before my paycheck cleared. Math isn't mathing when you owe $1,247 in rent and your minimum payment on the Capital One card is $347 this month. I've been doing DoorDash deliveries after my shifts just to keep up, and I think my beat-up 2018 Honda Civic is actively trying to die on me. So, when my fiancé, called me Tuesday at 11:47 a.m., I was actually mid-stress cry in the office bathroom on the 5th floor. He told me his incredibly wealthy, incredibly complicated Aunt Beatrice had finally passed away, and we needed to be at the will reading on Friday. This was supposed to be the moment, the financial miracle, the reason I could finally pay off the damn cards and maybe stop eating leftover pizza for breakfast. Reading was scheduled for 5:30 p.m. today, Friday, at my fiancé's family house, specifically in the in-laws' basement. Why the basement? Because the house is huge, but Chloe Turner, 76F, my fiancé's mom, insisted on hosting it there. Chloe, by the way, is an absolute menace. She's fitness obsessed, literally obsessed. She runs a local competitive pickleball league and wears Lululemon head to toe even when she's just making instant coffee. Always gives off this vibe that she's 100% judging my life choices, especially my decision to order Taco Bell instead of making a kale smoothie. Every time I see her, she talks about her new personal best on the Peloton and then gives me a look that screams, you should be doing cardio. The basement, where we are currently trapped, is exactly what you picture. Cement floors, low ceilings, one tiny window, and 3 years worth of forgotten holiday decorations. Smells vaguely of mildew and passive-aggressive resentment. I showed up wearing my one nice black dress, the one from Target I saved up for, and found the entire miserable crew assembled. First up, Frank Young, 37M. Frank is my fiancé's cousin and my actual childhood rival. We grew up 2 blocks apart, and he has always made it his life mission to one-up me. If I got an A, he got an A+. If I drove a Civic, he suddenly leased a BMW he clearly cannot afford. Works in crypto or something equally vague and perpetually looks like he's about to ask you if you've heard of his startup. He was there, fiddling with his Apple Watch, pretending to be busy but actually just calculating how much money he was about to inherit. Then there was Lucas King, 21M. Lucas is a friend, or at least I thought he was, who has always been two-faced. He acts sweet and supportive to my face. OMG Ella, you deserve the world. And then 5 minutes later, I hear him whispering something vaguely awful to Frank about my debt situation. I kept telling myself Lucas is young, he doesn't know better, but honestly, past me was such an idiot for believing that. Lucas was dressed like he was attending a yacht party, even though we were literally in a moldy basement. He was sipping a Starbucks iced coffee, venti cold brew. I saw him order it, and giving everyone fake pitying looks. Lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man whose face was actively trying to dissolve into his suit, cleared his throat and started reading the preamble about Aunt Beatrice's estate. It went on forever. Honestly, I was trying to discreetly check my Zelle balance on my phone because I realized I never paid the $85 emergency plumber charge from Tuesday. I was trying to focus, I really was, but the sound of Chloe, 76F, doing quiet isometric exercises in the corner was incredibly distracting. She was literally flexing her traps while listening to a legal document. Finally, we got to the good stuff. Aunt Beatrice was worth a lot. Like enough to make my credit card debt disappear and buy a nicer Civic. The lawyer droned on. Frank was practically vibrating. Lucas was trying to look bored but kept checking his reflection in his iPhone 14 screen. To my dear cousin, Frank Young, the lawyer read, I leave my entire collection of vintage comic books, housed in the storage unit in Akron. Frank's face fell. Comic books, that's it? He looked like he was about to scream. The comic books are probably worth something, but Frank needs cash, not collectibles. The disappointment was palpable, and in GL, I felt a tiny, petty surge of satisfaction. Lawyer continued, and to Lucas King, 21M, for keeping me up to date on all the current societal trends, I leave the contents of my Pinterest board entitled, Cottagecore Crochet Patterns. Lucas, the two-faced little monster, actually let out a small, high-pitched gasp of outrage. He spent 20 minutes explaining to Aunt Beatrice how to set up her Hulu account last Christmas. This was his reward, a digital mood board. He looked absolutely betrayed. Okay, now it was my turn. My fiancé's name was next, and by extension, my financial salvation. And now, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses, we move to the bulk of the liquid assets, the home in Malibu, and the 3 separate investment accounts, all designated for the individual who has shown the most consistent dedication to physical and mental discipline. I instantly knew who it was. Chloe Turner, the fitness obsessive, the woman who treats life like a competitive marathon. Heart sank, but I had a backup plan. If my fiancé was designated an asset manager or something, we could still tap into it. I started mentally drafting my letter to Chase Bank about the $347 minimum payment. The lawyer looked directly at Chloe, 76F. To Chloe Turner, he announced, I bequeath the entire remainder of the estate. Chloe let out a victorious, slightly manic laugh. She was mid-bicep curl, even now. Frank looked like he was going to vomit. Lucas looked like he was planning a social media smear campaign against a dead woman. The condition that she maintain a verified 85% lean muscle mass and complete a full Ironman triathlon within the next 18 months. The basement went silent. Chloe's victorious laugh turned into a choked, rattling sound. She dropped the small 5 lb dumbbell she was holding. An Ironman. Chloe managed, her voice surprisingly weak for a woman who just bragged about doing 47 minutes on her Peloton this morning. Beatrice knows I have chronic hip bursitis and a pre-existing heart murmur. This is cruel. The lawyer just shrugged his shoulders, adjusting his tie. It is legally binding, Mrs. Turner. Failure to meet the conditions means the entire estate rolls over to the second designated party. And who is the second designated party? Frank demanded, leaping forward, his face suddenly full of renewed hope. I was bracing myself. My fiancé. Maybe, please let it be my fiancé. I need $1,247 for rent. I just had a Zelle transaction fail because I only had $17.02 in my checking. The second designated party, the lawyer stated calmly, is Ella Lopez. My jaw literally dropped. Like cartoon character jaw drop? Me, Ella Lopez, 18F. Girl fighting credit card debt and eating gas station coffee? What? Why? I stammered. Aunt Beatrice noted, the lawyer continued, oblivious to the absolute chaos he had unleashed, that despite your current financial struggles, you consistently walk 10,000 steps a day while delivering food and work 60 hours a week to manage your debts, showing an admirable persistence that she deeply respected. Frank let out a sound like a wounded buffalo. This is insane. A literal child gets the estate? Lucas just pointed his finger at me. She literally Venmo requested me $20 last week for gas. She's broke? But I couldn't hear them. I was too focused on Chloe. Chloe Turner, 76F, the woman who dedicated her entire life to being physically perfect, was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Idea that her massive inheritance was contingent on her running a marathon she couldn't physically handle, or that it would roll over to me, was too much. This isn't fair, she shrieked. I am in peak condition. I literally just did a plank for 3 minutes and 45 seconds. She stomped her foot down on the cement floor. And then the health scare happened. She grabbed her chest. Hard. Her face, which had been bright red with anger, suddenly went sheet white. I felt my stomach drop straight to the floor. My hands started shaking, the phone nearly slipping through my sweaty fingers. Chloe? Frank asked, his rage forgot. Chloe didn't answer. She took a ragged, wheezing breath and then her eyes rolled back into her head. She crumpled right there on the cold, damp basement floor amidst a pile of inflatable Santa decorations and a box labeled 1998 tax returns. The lawyer immediately looked panicked. Someone call 911. Frank and Lucas both froze, staring at the motionless body of Chloe Turner. This is the will-reading chaos I was promised. Except now I am looking at an unconscious 76-year-old woman and realizing that if she dies right here, right now, the entire multi-million-dollar estate transfers immediately to me. I didn't move. I couldn't. I was looking at a ticket out of credit card debt and overwhelming relief, but it was contingent on a health scare, maybe a tragedy. Frank finally snapped out of it and started shouting incoherently about CPR while fumbling for his BMW keys. Lucas, in classic Two-Face friend style, immediately grabbed his phone and started recording a video. Guys, Lucas said to Frank, if she's dead, Ella gets everything. Are we sure we want to intervene too fast? Frank looked from Lucas to me, then down at his mother, who was still unresponsive. The rage in his eyes was instantly replaced by a calculating, cold look. Lawyer was yelling for water. I felt sick. I backed up, silently creeping toward the laundry room, needing a second, just 1 second, to process. I am currently hiding behind the industrial-sized washing machine, typing this out because I think I'm going to throw up. My whole life, my entire financial future, my ability to pay my $1,247 rent depends on the next 60 seconds of this woman's existence. And then I heard a terrible sound from the basement floor, a gurgling, painful gasp. Frank's voice, low and dangerously quiet just meters away from my hiding spot, said, "Don't just stand there, Lucas. Help me move her. Before the paramedics get here, we need to know what she was doing down here." Move her? Move her where and why? Then Lucas whispers back, "Wait, Frank, look at her Apple Watch. It says her heart rate is only 47 BPM. And Frank, look at the other arm." What is that? Frank cursed, a sharp, low sound. That's an insulin pump, but she's not diabetic. What the hell is going on? I'm clinging to my phone, shaking, trying not to breathe too loud. They think she's unconscious, maybe dying, but they are more concerned with what she was doing down here. And then I heard Frank say something that made the blood drain from my face, connecting my credit card debt and my financial nightmares to this sudden, terrifying medical emergency. It has to be a red herring, Lucas, Frank hissed. Aunt Beatrice would never give everything to Ella. It's a trick. Chloe was meeting someone down here. This isn't just a health scare. This is about the $200 withdrawals she'd been making weekly for 3 months. She was selling something. We need to find the cash and we need to make sure Ella never sees the true second party. The true second party? But the lawyer just read my name. Suddenly, I hear a slight, low movement. Someone is pushing the storage boxes aside. I am trapped. They are 5 feet away. Chloe is still on the floor. And I just found out my potential inheritance is tied to some shady, non-diabetic use of an insulin pump and weekly $200 cash withdrawals. The sound of Frank taking a heavy, deliberate step toward the laundry room door, my only exit, is making my ears ring. I don't know what to do. Call 911 and save her life, potentially losing the estate to Frank if she recovers and proves I'm a red herring, or stay quiet and figure out what the hell they're talking about. Frank just knocked something over. It was a metal shelf. He's coming this way. I can hear him breathing. What the fuck do I do now? Oh my god, Frank is literally 1 foot away from me. I froze. I stopped breathing. You guys know that moment in a horror movie where the dumb character is hiding behind a shower curtain and the killer walks by? I was that character, except the killer was a man obsessed with crypto, and the shower curtain was a stack of Tide Pods and industrial-sized fabric softener. Frank knocked over that metal shelf, and it made this ear-splitting clang. Luckily, it didn't collapse entirely, but it created enough noise that he and Lucas stopped whispering. I heard Frank curse again. Check the boxes, Lucas, check everything. We need to know what Chloe was doing down here. If she flatlines, Ella gets the Malibu house. We cannot let that happen. Lucas, bless his two-faced, yuppie heart, whined, Frank, my new Laura Opina sweater is going to get mildew on it. And are we seriously ignoring the unconscious woman bleeding out of her nose? Wait, bleeding out of her nose? My stomach lurched again. This isn't just a faint, this is bad. Frank hissed, she's not bleeding, you idiot. She just hit her head on the cement. Keep looking for the cash withdrawals. Aunt Beatrice was obsessed with fairness. If Chloe was running a side hustle down here, we need the evidence that invalidates the will. Find the secondary documents. He was actively rooting around the boxes right next to my hiding spot. I could smell his expensive cologne mixing with the basement mildew. Air conditioning unit hummed loudly above me, which was actually a saving grace because it drowned out the sound of my ragged breathing. I needed to act. Chloe was still gurgling slightly. They were ignoring a medical emergency to chase cash and documents. This is seriously next-level terrible human behavior. I took a giant risk. I quietly, deliberately cleared my throat. Just a small, dry sound. Frank stopped dead. Did you hear that? He whispered to Lucas. Lucas squeaked, a rat. Very large, debt-ridden rat? Frank ignored Lucas. He took one slow step toward the laundry room door. The door wasn't solid, it was one of those cheap bifold things that never properly closes. I had about 2 seconds. I had to ditch the phone and get out. But then I had a thought that cut through the panic. Community support. You guys. I've been venting to the sub for months about my financial hellscape and how Chloe treats me like dirt. I know what Frank and Lucas are capable of. I rapidly typed 4 words and hit send to the main group chat I have with my best friend Sarah and my other friend Maya, 911, basement. Now, then I threw my phone into a laundry basket full of damp towels. Frank yanked the bifold door open. I was standing there looking exactly like I had just come out of the laundry room, which I had. Ella, Frank said, his face a mask of shock and controlled rage. What are you doing back here? I pretended to look startled, pointing a trembling finger at the washing machine. I heard a sound. I was looking for the bathroom. The lawyer told me the bathroom was through here, but I heard a crash and I just came to see if. I gestured vaguely toward Chloe's inert body. Lucas stepped forward, recovering his composure instantly. We were just checking on Chloe, Ella. You shouldn't be back here. Frank just tripped on a box. We need to focus on getting her help. Lies. We're literally planning how to screw me out of my inheritance 2 minutes ago. Frank cut in, his voice dangerously smooth. Why are you here, Ella? Did you hear what the lawyer said? Yes, I managed. I heard that Aunt Beatrice thought my commitment to DoorDashing 60 hours a week showed admirable persistence. I also heard that Chloe just collapsed. We're calling 911 now, Frank declared, pulling out his ridiculous gold-plated iPhone. He was trying to sound like a good guy now that I was present. Good, I said, trying to steady my voice. I walked past him and knelt carefully next to Chloe. She was still pale, still unresponsive, but that gurgling was gone. She was just breathing shallowly. I looked at the Apple Watch they had mentioned. 47 BPM. Super low for a fitness fanatic, especially one who had just had an emotional breakdown. Yes, there was a tiny, clear plastic line running from her arm up to a small device near her elbow, an insulin pump. I stood up. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, left already, I noted, looking at the empty spot where the dissolving lawyer had been standing. Of course he fled. He went to get his car to lead the ambulance in. Lucas lied instantly. Right, I said, looking Frank straight in the eye. So Frank, since you are calling 911, maybe you can mention the insulin pump. She have diabetes? Frank hesitated. This was the moment of truth. He looked genuinely torn between keeping their shady discovery quiet and potentially saving his mother's life. No, Frank admitted, his face tightening. She doesn't. We just noticed it. We don't know why it's there. I didn't press it. I didn't need to. I had confirmed their suspicion that something was seriously wrong beyond just a heart murmur. So 2 days later, after the absolute nightmare Friday night, Chloe is in the ICU, critical but stable. They said it was a massive adrenal crash combined with a serious electrolyte imbalance, possibly due to overexertion or, get this, misuse of medications. They kept asking about the insulin pump, which Frank and Lucas had naturally managed to misplace before the paramedics arrived. Shady AF. My phone, retrieved from the damp laundry basket, it survived, thank God, battery health still at 78%, has been blowing up. Frank is texting me, pretending to be concerned. Frank, 9:45 a.m. Ella, are you holding up okay? This whole thing is devastating. We are all worried about Chloe. Do you think we should talk to the lawyer about what this means for the estate? Translation. Ella, I need to know if you've already bought the Malibu house. I ignored him. My immediate priority wasn't the Malibu house, which frankly felt cursed, but the $1,247 in rent I owed on Monday. Only good thing about that awful night was that Sarah and Maya, my friends, actually showed up and found me crouching over Chloe, while Frank and Lucas were still trying to locate whatever shady documents they were looking for. They called 911 properly, provided basic information, and chased Frank and Lucas away from the documents. They saved my sanity, honestly. Sarah, who is a nurse, took one look at Chloe's complexion and the missing insulin pump and said, "This woman is using something to cut weight or boost energy, or maybe both. This is not natural." TBH, that made the whole admirable persistence clause in the will feel a little more complex. Did Aunt Beatrice know Chloe was cheating? Was this her final, chaotic prank? A week went by where I was basically a zombie. I couldn't focus on DoorDashing. I called in sick to my office job twice, which I haven't done since I had the stomach flu in high school. The debt felt heavier than ever because the potential salvation was now a critically ill 76-year-old woman and an ongoing investigation into potential will fraud and medication misuse. Fun times. I finally called the lawyer, Mr. Henderson, who sounded incredibly stressed. "Miss Lopez," he squeaked over the phone. "The will is highly conditional. Mrs. Turner fails to meet the Ironman requirement, you inherit. However, given her current medical state, we're entering a long, drawn-out legal battle. But what about the secondary party clause? I asked. Frank said I might be a red herring and there's a true second party. Mr. Henderson coughed dryly. The will explicitly names you, Miss Lopez, as the sole alternate. Unless new information surfaces that invalidates the entire document, you're next in line. Her insistence on consistency and financial survival apparently impressed Beatrice more than anyone else's assets. I hung up feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified. Relieved because I was actually named. Terrified because Frank and Lucas were clearly still looking for documents that might invalidate the will entirely, which would throw the entire estate into general probate, which means YEARS of court and zero immediate cash for my $1,247 rent. I needed to solve the debt problem first. I ended up calling the bank, crying a little bit, and explaining that I was waiting on an inheritance. They gave me a 10-day extension on the minimum payment, but the rent was still due. This is where the community support approach became real. I posted a very truncated, anxiety-ridden version of the will chaos update to the sub, leaving out the debt details because that felt too private, but emphasizing how awful Frank and Lucas were being. Response was insane. People were furious on my behalf. But one particular comment from a user named Budget Babe suggested something practical. Sell assets, even small ones. I looked around my tiny apartment. I didn't have much. Then I remembered the Target dress I wore to the reading. No, too sentimental. Wait, my fiancé. The one who started this whole mess by calling me Tuesday at 11:47 a.m. Where the hell was he during the collapse? He had conveniently disappeared to call a doctor friend right when Chloe dropped. He hadn't been back to the house since, texting me only vague updates. I realized I hadn't heard from him in 48 hours. I messaged him, me 9:01 p.m. Where are you? Your mother's in the ICU and Frank and Lucas are running around the basement looking for cash and an insulin pump. We need to talk about rent and the will. Fiancé, 11:34 p.m. So sorry, babe, super busy. Was trying to process everything. We'll talk soon. Don't worry about the will or the rent. I'll handle it. That last sentence, I'll handle it, felt weirdly dismissive. Like I was being taken care of, but also being pushed out of the conversation entirely. Fast forward to Friday, 1 week after the collapse, I was finally able to get my act together enough to DoorDash again. I needed cash. I needed $300 by the end of the day or I was officially late on rent and facing eviction proceedings. My car, the beat-up 2018 Honda Civic, started making a grinding noise every time I braked. Just perfect. I was pulling up to a customer's house when my fiancé called. I braced myself. Ella, listen, he said, skipping the greeting entirely. I need you to do something for me, something that will help us get the estate faster. Okay, what? I asked, my heart pounding. I need you to go to the house and get the safe deposit box key from under the 5th floor statue. Aunt Beatrice gave it to Mom years ago, but Mom stored it there. I need you to bring it to me, immediately. The safe deposit box, what's in it? Just old paperwork, trust me. Frank and Lucas are distracting each other and Mom is still out of it. We need to secure the documents before they do. If they find it, they'll use it to prove the will is invalid and we lose everything. It sounded like something out of a bad spy movie, but my rent was due in 4 hours, and he promised it would help us. Why can't you get it? I'm at the hospital. The lawyers are here. Hurry, Ella. Our future depends on this. So I went. I drove my grinding Civic across town to the massive, terrifying family house. I used the key under the mat, the same key that unlocks the door to the mildew-scented basement of chaos. I crept up to the 5th floor, which was less of a floor and more of a luxurious attic filled with incredibly expensive, creepy antique furniture. I found the statue, a porcelain bird, and sure enough, under it was a small brass key. As I started back down the stairs, I heard voices coming from the main floor. Loud voices. It was Frank and Lucas, and they weren't alone. I told you, Frank, Lucas was saying, whining. Beatrice said if we found the key, she would leave us something concrete, not just these stupid crochet patterns. This is ridiculous. She literally promised me the Tesla. Shut up, Lucas, Frank snapped. We need to figure out why Chloe was withdrawing cash every week, and where that key is. The key is the only thing that proves the true secondary beneficiary. We saw it in her safe 2 months ago. It has to be in this house. My heart hammered against my ribs. True secondary beneficiary? But the lawyer said it was me. I flattened myself behind a heavy velvet curtain on the 3rd floor landing. I realized this wasn't about the will reading anymore. This was about a secret second document. Then I heard a new voice, a voice I knew very well. Guys, seriously, my fiancé said, sounding impatient. Stop arguing about the Tesla. Ella should be here any minute with the key. He's completely trusting she'll just hand it over. My blood ran cold. My fiancé was there. He wasn't at the hospital with lawyers. He was collaborating with Frank and Lucas, and he called me completely trusting. Frank laughed. God, your girl is useful. Did you seriously tell her you were saving us? Of course, my fiancé replied, his voice dripping with condescension. She's so desperate for the money to cover her ridiculous credit card debt, she'll do anything. Is worried about $300 late fees. She won't even look at the key. She'll just hand it over and then we go to the bank, open the box, and find the real secondary will. Lucas, and if the real secondary will names one of us, where does that leave Ella? My fiancé, sounding genuinely annoyed. Honestly, who cares? She's a sweet kid, but she's financially illiterate. She gets nothing. We split the assets 3 ways like we planned with Aunt Beatrice before she passed. Wait, and with Aunt Beatrice before she passed? This was premeditated fraud. And I was the key, literally and figuratively, to their scheme. I felt a surge of pure, freezing rage wash over the panic. $1,247 in rent. $347 minimum payment. I was DoorDashing in a dying Civic, skipping meals, fighting tooth and nail to survive, and they were using my desperation like a weapon. I slowly backed up the stairs again, retreating to the 5th floor. I needed space to think, and I needed to call 911 on these people. Not for medical help this time, but for actual police help. I pulled out my phone. My thumb was hovering over the keypad. But then, the final, perfect, petty thought occurred to me. I held the brass key in my hand. It was cold and heavy. They needed this key to access the true, secondary will that would screw me over. I decided I was done playing the completely trusting, financially illiterate sweet kid. I texted my fiancé back. Me 1:05 p.m. on my way, but I need you to Zelle me $1,500 first. For rent and emergency car repairs. Otherwise, I'm dropping the key in the nearest storm drain. I hit send, then I immediately put my phone on silent and shoved it deep into my bra. I waited 5 minutes hiding behind a dusty tapestry. My fiancé's texts started flooding my silent phone. He tried calling 4 times. Could hear his muffled voice yelling downstairs. Frank, what is it? Fiancé, sounding completely frantic. Ella just texted me. She wants $1,500 or she's destroying the key. Lucas, hysterically, $1,500. She's holding us hostage for $1,500. Frank, pay her. We need that key. Pay her. You have the Cash App. Fiancé, I don't have $1,500 liquid right now. I spent it on those vintage watches last week. Oh, the irony. They had millions on the line, but $1,500 was too much for them to scrape together immediately. I decided to make my appearance dramatic. I walked down the stairs, one slow, deliberate step at a time, holding the brass key up between my thumb and forefinger like I was presenting evidence on CSI. They all stopped and stared at me. My fiancé, Frank, and Lucas were standing in the front hall, looking completely busted. My fiancé tried to pull off his usual charming smile. Ella, babe, there you are. Don't be silly about the money. We can talk about it later. Just give me the key, okay? He held out his hand. I didn't smile back. I was surprisingly calm. The fear was gone, replaced by this cold, satisfying focus. You called me financially illiterate, I stated, and completely trusting. You were planning to cut me out of the entire estate, even the money Aunt Beatrice specifically designated for me because I'm persistent. Frank stepped forward. Ella, don't be dramatic. This is family business. That key doesn't belong to you. I think it does, I said, looking right at my fiancé. You told me our future depends on this, and I agree. My financial future depends on this, and since you won't Zelle me $1,500 to save my credit score, you clearly aren't invested in our future. I saw the Zelle notification pop up on my phone screen, not $1,500, but $500. A pittance. I looked at my fiancé. $500? You think I'm that cheap? He paled. It's all I have right now, I promise. No, I said, shaking my head. The price went up. It's $5,000 now, and if you even breathe heavily in my direction, I call the police and report you for attempted financial fraud because I recorded that entire conversation on the 5th floor. I was lying. I did not record them, but they didn't know that. They immediately started sweating. Lucas looked like he was going to cry over the idea of being arrested in his expensive yacht party outfit. Frank's face was twisted in silent fury. He knew I was bluffing, but he couldn't take the risk. They had admitted to planning to invalidate the will. My fiancé whispered, Ella, please, give me the key. We can talk about the money later. No, I repeated, firm. The time for talking is over. You lied to me, you used my financial distress, and you tried to steal an inheritance that was explicitly set aside for me, even if it was the fallback. I am not financially illiterate, I am just broke. Big difference. I did something truly magnificent. I turned, walked out the front door, and locked it behind me. I heard the screaming begin immediately. They couldn't get out, they were trapped. I ran down the driveway, got into my Civic, it still ground loudly BTW, and instead of going to the bank or a storm drain, I drove straight to Sarah's house. I didn't get $5,000 immediately, but I did get $500, and I kept the key. Update, the fallout has been intense. I immediately used the $500 for rent and groceries. I sent a massive thank you text to Budget Babe on Reddit. I still owed $747, but I had 10 more days before the landlord would really escalate. I went to the police with Sarah. I didn't tell them about the inheritance, only that Frank, Lucas, and my fiancé had attempted to coerce me into handing over a safe deposit box key that belonged to a family estate, that they admitted to plotting fraud, and that they had physically trapped themselves inside the house after I left. The police were confused but interested. They showed up at the house. My fiancé was forced to climb out a ground floor window to talk to them, which Sarah secretly recorded on her phone. Seeing his face covered in dust and defeat was almost worth the debt. I broke up with him, obviously. I sent a short, clean text, it's over. I'm taking the Civic. I'm keeping the key. Don't contact me unless it's to confirm the $4,500 Zelle payment. He never sent the money. He did send me a novel-length text message about how I ruined his life, how I was ungrateful, and how I would never survive without his support. LOL. I blocked him on everything. It's been 2 weeks since I became a key-wielding fugitive. Chloe is still in the ICU, but she's stable enough that the lawyers are now arguing about the conditions of the will. Frank and Lucas are fighting constantly, mostly about who betrayed who first, and my ex-fiancé is hiding out at his friend's place, constantly messaging our mutual friends asking if I've told the lawyer where the key is. I haven't. The key is now taped to the back of my passport. I finally managed to sell some things on Poshmark, mostly old clothes and some cheap electronics, and I DoorDashed enough to cover the remaining $747 rent and put $200 toward the minimum credit card payment. My stress levels dropped by about 30%, which means I only cried once yesterday, not 3 times. The biggest development came from Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. He called me Tuesday. Miss Lopez, we have a complication. Mrs. Turner's doctors confirm she will not be able to participate in the Ironman. Her kidneys were severely compromised due to dehydration and misuse of supplements, likely tied to her extreme fitness regimen. My heart leaped. This means I win, I get the estate, I pay off the debt. However, Henderson continued, sounding miserable, Mrs. Turner is now alleging that she was coerced by Aunt Beatrice into accepting the condition, and that she has a separate verbal agreement about the true beneficiary. And who is that? I asked, already fearing the worst. She won't say. She just says the beneficiary is the one who understands the struggle. This is where Lucas King, 21M, comes back into the picture, but in the most bizarre way possible. Lucas, the two-faced little monster, showed up at my work parking lot this morning. I literally saw him coming and hid behind my Civic, but he spotted me. Ella, wait, he shouted. He looked completely unkempt. His yacht party clothes were wrinkled. Go away, Lucas, I said, putting my hands up. No, listen. Frank and your ex are trying to force Chloe to name one of them as the true secondary beneficiary. They are promising her access to better doctors and the promise of not going to jail for the supplement misuse. Why are you telling me this? Lucas looked genuinely distraught. Because I realized what absolute garbage I've been. Aunt Beatrice's will for me the cottagecore crochet patterns, it wasn't a joke, came with a long letter about how I needed to stop pretending to be something I'm not and start working with my hands and building real, tangible things instead of just chasing vague crypto wealth. She called me out for being shallow and told me to get a real life. I blinked. And you believed her? I did. I started crocheting. TBH, it's really relaxing. I made this scarf. He held up a truly lopsided, ugly, but definitely handmade blue scarf. Point is, I'm done being two-faced. I realized that my debt I'm not rich, Ella. I'm leveraged to the max was making me cruel. Frank offered to cover my lease if I helped him find the key, and I almost took it. But I saw the look on your face when you realized your fiancé was using you, and I realized I was just as bad. Okay, significant character development alert. The universe is weird. Lucas continued. Chloe isn't going to name Frank or your ex. Hates them both now, and she's realizing what they're doing. But she's obsessed with this idea of the one who understands the struggle. That's what the $200 withdrawals were for. She was secretly attending a support group for people who struggle with body dysmorphia and extreme performance anxiety, using the insulin pump as a cover for other weight loss meds and supplements. She realized her whole life was a lie. This was heartbreaking. It finally connected the dots. Chloe wasn't collapsing from competition, she was collapsing from the pressure of maintaining a facade. So who does she want the estate to go to? I asked, clutching the key in my bra. The person who shows that commitment and hustle that Aunt Beatrice praised, Lucas said. The one who is facing real-world financial consequences, not just pretending to be broke while wearing Loro Piana. Ella, she wants to name you. My entire body went slack with shock. Lucas pulled out his own phone. But she needs the key. She wants to use the original safe deposit box documents to publicly shame Frank and your ex for attempting fraud, and then legally confirm you as the beneficiary, skipping the whole Ironman fail clause. She asked me to bring this to you. It was a picture of a text message from Chloe's medical burner phone. OE76F, tell Ella Lopez if she brings the key, I will make sure she gets everything, including $10,000 immediately for her rent and credit cards. Tell her I understand the struggle now. Tell her I'm sorry for judging her Taco Bell habits. I stared at the screen. The financial miracle was finally here, mediated by the very woman who hated my existence, and it was contingent on community support, thanks, Lucas, and a shared understanding of deep, messy struggle. 3 days after that, I went to the ICU. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, was there, looking slightly less like he was dissolving into his suit. Lucas was waiting outside, awkwardly crocheting a hat. I walked into Chloe's room. She looked tiny and pale, hooked up to monitors, but her eyes, usually manic and judgmental, were just tired. I handed her the key. This is it, she nodded. You could have sold this to Frank for 10 times what I offered. I know, I said. He and my ex were going to use it to invalidate the will and hurt you. I didn't want the estate that way. She gave a ghost of a smile. Admirable persistence. Beatrice knew what she was doing. I was always chasing the wrong goal. You were just trying to survive. That is the real Ironman. Honestly, it was a little dramatic, but whatever, she was on heavy meds. She signed the documents, the ones proving that Frank, Lucas, and my ex had conspired with Aunt Beatrice to set up the will reading to expose their greed, and that the only actual backup was me, the girl with the crushing credit card debt, because I was the only one actually struggling to stay afloat. The $10,000 hit my checking account 48 hours later. Immediately paid off Capital One, $347 minimum, gone, and settled my rent, $1,247, gone. I felt lighter than air. The aftermath is still messy, TBH. Frank is now actively under investigation for his role in the conspiracy and possible tax evasion. Turns out his crypto business was even sketchier than I thought. Ex-fiancé tried to file a restraining order against me, saying I stole the key, but the lawyer shut that down immediately. I changed my number. The Civic is still grinding, but now I have money for a proper mechanic. Lucas is actually doing well. He posted a picture of his ugly scarf on Instagram, and apparently it got a surprisingly large response. He sent me a Zelle requesting $20, which I immediately thought was a cruel joke, but the description said, for gas. Hit forward. I sent it. $20. The cycle is broken. I am not living in the Malibu house yet. The estate is still tied up in legal logistics, which Henderson says could take 6-12 months, but I am out of crippling debt. My battery health is still 78%, but my mental health is finally climbing above 50%. I learned so much, mostly that desperation makes people do insane things, including ignoring an unconscious old lady to chase a safe deposit key. But I also learned that community support, both online from the sub and real life from Sarah and Lucas, the new Crocheting Lucas, is the only way to survive chaos. I still DoorDash, but now it's for savings, not survival. Yesterday, I ordered Taco Bell and didn't feel an ounce of guilt because I earned it. I'm closing this thread, you guys. Chaos is settling, but the bills are paid, and I learned that sometimes the persistence you show just trying to get through Tuesday is worth more than a six-figure salary. Anyway, that's the update. I'm gonna go schedule a long overdue oil change. Wish me luck with the Civic. We'll update if I ever move into that Malibu house, but for now, the shoebox apartment feels like heaven.